Today's episode is sponsored by Datadog, the cloud-scale monitoring service that provides comprehensive visibility into public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environments with over 250 integrations. Datadog unifies your metrics, logs, and distributed request traces into one platform, so you can investigate and troubleshoot issues across every layer of your stack. Use Datadog's rich, customizable dashboards and algorithmic alerts to monitor cloud migrations in real time. To start a free trial today, and Datadog sending you a free t-shirt, visit datadoghq.com/cloudcast to get started. That's datadoghq.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope you all are having a good week. Things are beginning to move into August. We are getting into that month where we're going to start seeing more trade shows. We're going to see the kids go back to school, and hopefully it starts to get a little bit cooler, especially for those locations that have been kind of baking in the heat of the summer. So hope you're all doing well. Let's go ahead and get to the cloud news of the week. Kind of a mixed bag this week. Not nearly as many big announcements or big numbers that we've had over the last couple of weeks, but a few things in there that are worth looking into, and a little bit of drama happening between the cloud providers. So let's get started with a name change. So Mesosphere, so the company that really had brought to market and commercialized Mesos and Marathon technologies that had originated in Twitter, and we've had them on the show a couple of times, officially changed their name. So they've been going through a transition over the last year or so, kind of moving away from Mesos and Marathon, moving more towards Kubernetes as the rest of the industry has. And they officially renamed themselves to Day2IQ, or D2IQ for short. So if you start seeing D2IQ or Day2IQ, that is the company formerly known as Mesosphere, and a much more of a focus on Kubernetes technologies for them. So second, and this was sort of an interesting one, not so much for the announcement itself, but kind of the aftermath of it. Microsoft made some changes to its licensing for dedicated cloud services. So they used to have licensing that was specific, that if you had an on-premises license and you wanted to move it to a hosting service, there were some rules and guidelines in terms of how that was in place, and you weren't necessarily allowed to do that if you moved it to like a virtual service in the cloud. So it was specific to essentially hosting services. And now that we're beginning to see these dedicated hardware services up in public clouds, they made some adjustments for that as well. So, not super new. The licenses change all the time and so forth. You can read the details in the show notes, but it was sort of interesting to watch Werner Vogels, who's the CTO from AWS, make a big stink about this on Twitter, about how Microsoft is bait and switching people. People kind of came back to that and said, maybe they are making some changes, but AWS is also known for taking lots of open source code from people and not contributing back, or taking money out of people's pockets. So it is fun to watch the cloud providers begin to fight with each other. It's not rosy anymore as it used to be. I think that just means an amping up of the competition between all the different cloud providers. We also saw some noise out there about AWS trying to enforce an NDA or a right to work for a former employee that is now working over at Google Cloud, or at least trying to work at Google Cloud. So it is fun to see some animosity between them. I know customers don't like to see it out in the wild, but it is sort of fun as an industry watcher to sort of see the competitive landscape pick up and see people's personalities kind of come out as a result of that. Third thing was Amazon, I guess AWS, acquired a company called E3 Storage, Israeli-based startup, about 25 people or so, I think is the number. So smaller company, but a lot of focus for them on trying to be very efficient and drive optimization for SSD-backed storage. So, the idea behind this likely is that this will help them, Amazon, as they move into Outposts, what they're doing for their on-prem types of offerings, being able to deliver a appliance type of form factor that is baked with lots of SSDs, and trying to bring the cost down of that and drive performance and so forth. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens with the E8 acquisition. So early startup in the SSD space. And then finally, also in the cloud space, Google moved into beta their what was called Anthos Migrate. So if you were paying attention to the Anthos announcement, their thing about getting on-prem, there was sort of a side announcement, or kind of a partial feature announcement about a migration service Google had acquired a company that focused on migrations, and they are now moving that Anthos Migrate into beta. So we will see more and more, and probably hopefully hear some more details about how Google plans to do migrations from existing applications or VMs into containers. That'll be sort of interesting, given containers they're not exactly the same as VMs. You need to understand dependencies and other stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that tooling works. So with that, we're going to kind of wrap up our cloud news of the week. Like I said, it's a mixed bag of a little bit of acquisition, a little bit of new technologies, a little bit of some announcements and so forth. So with that, we have a very, very interesting guest today. The folks from Learn on Demand Systems, I think, are going to be very interesting for those of you that are trying to figure out, where do I go next in my career? What do I do in terms of learning? What are the next steps I take? Do I double down on technologies that maybe are mainstream today? Do I move towards things that are new? And they have a very, very unique way of trying to help you be very hands-on with your learning and get hopefully faster adoption of some of the new technologies that are out there. So very, very much looking forward to that. Let's go ahead and get to the interview. Today's show is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls and load balancers, a new managed Kubernetes service, and much more. From predictable pricing to flexible configurations to world-class customer support, you'll get access to all the infrastructure services you need to grow your business. Plus, DigitalOcean's community provides over 2,000 tutorials to help you stay up to date on the latest open source software, languages, and frameworks. So to get started on DigitalOcean for free, with a free $50 credit, go to do.co/cloudcast. That's do.co/cloudcast. And we're back. And folks, as you know, probably the most important thing that we try and do with this show on a week-to-week basis is we're trying to make sure that we're educating the listener. We're trying to make sure that as you show up, as you give us your time, you're essentially coming and saying, hey, I want to learn about something new. I want to try and advance my career. I want to get smarter about something. And ultimately, a lot of you, while you give us your time on a weekly basis for the podcast, are always trying to figure out how do you be efficient with your time. You don't necessarily have a lot. You're managing your job. You're managing trying to learn new things. You've got family and other commitments and so forth. And so we're always out here trying to find for you not only interesting people with new technologies, but also people that are working on ways to hopefully make you smarter, whether it's learning a new skill, whether it's learning how to get towards a certification, whatever you need. And very, very excited today to kind of look into a new way of doing that, some stuff that we're very, very excited about. So very excited to have Corey Hynes, who is CEO of Learn on Demand Systems. Corey, welcome to the show.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
So first off, welcome to the show. You are, we've sort of dug into not only the capabilities that Learn on Demand has, but sort of looking at your background, some of the conversations that you've had. You are passionate about helping people learn, and more importantly, and I think our listeners are going to love this, you're passionate about people learning in a hands-on manner, not just reading books or going to a meetup, but learning hands-on. Can you tell us a little about your background and kind of what's fueled this passion about not only what you do at Learn on Demand, but that hands-on is such an important part of the learning process? Well,
if you go back, to kind of how I got started, which was many years ago. I kind of began my career as a trainer. I started off and I kind of wanted to, interestingly, I wanted to become a cop, but I was too young. And so the cop school wouldn't take me. So they said, hey, go do something else. So I went to a little IT school and I went, well, this is kind of fun. And I stuck with it. But what I found is that I kind of naturally gravitated towards helping other people. So I'd learn stuff and I go, hey, let me show you this. Right from there, I think my path was, well, I want to be involved in IT education somehow because it just naturally was what I wanted to do. And the way that I kind of was doing this, and this is back, in the days of Novell NetWare and Windows LAN Manager and, way back in the early 90s, is I'd say, hey, let's go set up something. Let's go build something and let's learn by, not reading a book. Let's go build it and figure it out that way. And I found that if I just went out and built something, I knew a lot more. I learned a lot more. It was a lot quicker. And so some of these folks that were, studying books and taking practice tests and all this stuff, they were struggling. Whereas, I hardly touched the books. I just went in the lab and I went in the training room and I just said, I'm going to set up printers and I'm going to set up networks and I'm going to set up all these things. And so kind of right from there, it sort of unlocked this thing where if you do it, doesn't matter what it is, you retain it and you learn it. And so throughout my entire career, it's always been themed around that, no matter what it is. Even go back to the early days when I was a trainer training, Windows NT, which, again, is a hark back to kind of the mid-late 90s.
Right.
With all these training courses, they'd have, lecture for an hour, do a lab for an hour, lecture for an hour, do a lab for an hour. What I would do is I'd say, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to lecture for 2 days, and let's just get through all this stuff. And then we're going to spend the next 3 days and we're going to build something cool.
Yeah.
And I had, so many students that would request me as an instructor because they loved that idea. They loved that idea of, we're just going to go in and we're going to power through all the theory, and we're going to kind of get aware, and we're going to comprehend these big concepts, but then we're going to spend 3 or 4 days just playing and come out of that a lot more prepared. Felt like they knew a lot more. Felt like they were just generally more capable because they'd actually done it.
Right.
And that sort of mentality led me to, eventually work in all sorts of things. Like I worked with some of the certification teams for companies like Microsoft and Novell, building exams for a while. I've worked in the convention circuit, setting up these hands-on lab training rooms and speaking and doing sessions. I've sort of done all these things, and throughout that process, built a software platform that lets anybody do this, right? If you've ever set up a classroom, it's difficult. It's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of work. And so we wanted to find a way to make that simple, make that easy. And that's ultimately where Learn on Demand systems came from. This notion of, I want to go into a classroom and I want to give all these people the ability to play with the software they're learning, but I want to make it as easy as possible to give all these students these really, potentially, they don't have to be, but potentially these really complex environments to work in. And, looking forward to where we are today, we're doing this across, the definition of software has kind of changed. It used to be something you install. Now it's something you subscribe to. And so we're doing this across all these different platforms like Azure, like Amazon, like Docker, across, Windows and Hyper-V and VMware and Linux and just, any type of software platform or container that's out there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that podcasting is not a visual medium, because I'm just over here sort of like fist pumping going, yep, exactly. I think Aaron and I have both always been, hands-on learners. I think we've always found that, the best way to learn is, I'm going to throw you in the deep end of the pool. You're going to figure some things out on your own. You're going to make mistakes, and seeing those mistakes is important. And I think you highlight probably the most important thing, which is, it's not always as important to learn all the details of one specific thing, but sort of to learn how to learn. And because the one constant thing we have in IT is change. I think most people enjoy being in IT because of how frequently things change. And, so we love people who ultimately, we love having guests on the show who ultimately say, look, I didn't just build something because, I wanted to be somewhere on a Gartner Magic Quadrant, but I built something because, it was helping me solve a problem that I had. And, and the fact that, like you said, we've moved from software coming in a box and having to find, servers to go in, and to now it's on demand, it's in subscription. The systems have to change accordingly and so forth. So that's awesome that's your background, and more importantly, like that you value that as kind of a critical skill to develop as much as VMware or Windows.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. My first dive instructor a number of years ago told me, he said, the only way you become a good diver is by having terrible dives. And that mentality is true everywhere. You only truly learn by making mistakes and getting into trouble.
Right.
But how do you let people do that in a way where there's no consequences, where, oops, I deleted the database doesn't mean you get fired. It means you just go, well, let's roll back and let's try that again and let's get it right this time.
Right.
And I just strongly believe in that as a model.
Yeah. We touched a little bit on, you hit on, just the way that we consume technology has changed and so forth. It's on demand. It's not sort of software in a box or a CD anymore. But let's talk a little bit about how that applies to sort of learning and training. For folks that aren't familiar with Learn on Demand, give us kind of the spectrum, because you offer a whole lot of ways to do it, but everything from the labs that you offer to the challenges that are out there. Give us just a sense of kind of the breadth of ways that you can help people learn.
I like to think of us as we're kind of the best kept secret in the IT learning industry. There are so many, millions of people a year that use our stuff that just have no idea that they're using it. Because what we're ultimately trying to be is a plan. There's a couple of elements to it, but the biggest one is we're trying to be a platform that powers hands-on learning and gives companies that want to produce learning materials a way to do it quickly, easily, and safely, and then give their learners access to those training environments without any friction. Right. So if you just take a simple example, right, and I'll use two examples to kind of illustrate how we do this, and that'll help kind of clarify what we do in a way. So if you want to go to Amazon or Azure and practice, you've got to sign up for an account. You've got to, in most cases, put in a credit card, and then when you're done, you've got to make sure you delete the stuff that you created. Otherwise, you wind up with a big, huge bill. We give you access to Amazon or Azure for the purpose of learning something, one specific thing, in about 5 seconds because we've orchestrated the entire back end process. And you want to learn how to, for example, create a VM in EC2 or a VM in Azure IaaS. You click a button, you're given a temporary account. You can log on with that temporary account. You can do the one thing you went in there to do, nothing else. When you're done, you walk away and all the cleanup is done behind you. And, for an individual, that's really cool. But for someone who's trying to produce, training environments, it's an incredibly powerful thing. The second sort of scenario is, if you're a more traditional software platform that uses virtual machines. If you want to get a virtual machine in front of, 30 people to run a training class or a seminar or a workshop or whatever it might be, that's a difficult thing to do because there's big files to move around, or there's a lot of setup on a big server you've got to do, and you've got to figure out how to get people connectivity into those things in a safe way. So, Bob lands on the one that was meant for Bob. We do all that for you. You simply create a template, and we take care of all the deployment across one of the data centers we run. And within 10 seconds of clicking a button, they're in that VM that you wanted them to be in. So that's ultimately what the platform does as a whole, right? And you can find us if you start digging around. If you go on, for example, Microsoft Learn, which is the new learning platform, we're some of the back end behind that. If you go take a certification exam, and that certification exam has real live, what they call performance-based testing, that's us on the back end. If you go to one of the hundreds of training companies in the world that do anything from Microsoft to Google, Amazon to Cisco to whatever, most likely that's us on the back end that's powering what they do. If you go to one of these big tech conferences and they've got workshops or hands-on labs or instructor-led labs, that's usually us powering what they do. So, that's where you find us as a platform.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I think it sort of highlights the importance that we always call out. It's more and more you don't want to just kind of get materials, whether it's like software or a book or something. You really kind of want to work with people that if you're trying to learn ops, you're trying to learn some new skill, you're trying to learn automation, that you're working with people that actively have to do that. They're not just kind of giving you theory. They're doing that. And what you're sort of proving on the back end is, we have to live with Azure every day. We understand the changes they make. We understand the new services they have in, and we have to incorporate those. And you do those with other clouds as well. So yeah, no, that's very, very important. One of the new services that you have out that's just fairly recent, fairly new. It's something called IT Pro Challenges. And I thought they were interesting because there's lots of ways to kind of get trained. But more and more, and we see this with every system that we interact with, whether it's like, getting points, for using, for going to the most hotels or, kind of this gamification of things. You've created a system that is interesting on two fronts to me. Number one, it covers this broad spectrum of different skills and it's got different levels to it. So it's got sort of beginner, intermediate, and advanced. But also it's really relevant, or particularly really relevant to not only the users, but it's got relevance to if you're a manager and you're trying to help skill people up in your teams, or you're a recruiting team and you're trying to validate if somebody knows something. Kind of just walk us through the basics of this new IT Pro Challenge model that you have, and kind of the thought process behind, how do you involve gamification and these different levels to help people learn faster and kind of motivate them to keep moving up the stack.
There's a lot to unwrap there. There's a lot there. So to begin with, let's just kind of talk briefly about, hands-on learning. Okay, great. We love it. We know it's the best way to do things. And traditionally it's been, there was a term that was thrown around a long time called a clicker size, right? I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, which was take a document that says click here, click here, click here, click here. Congratulations, you've learned something. And that's been the model for hands-on learning for, as long as it's existed. The problem with that is, number one, it doesn't mentally challenge you. That's one problem. The second problem with that is, in the cloud era, the buttons change every other day, it seems. So I say click, save, and tomorrow that might say preserve instead of save, and now my instructions are wrong, and now my students are raising their hand and going, but it's not what it says, and people are confused. That happens on a frightening degree of frequency in the cloud world. In fact, if you look at just Microsoft Azure, every single configuration blade in Azure is owned by a different person, and they've got their own release schedule, so you never know when things are going to change. So the whole idea behind these challenges is we want to get away from, telling you exactly what to do and focus on giving you a goal and then measuring your ability to achieve that goal. There's a lot of kind of learning theory out there, and this is sort of my version of learning theory, which is, there's sort of four phases, which is you consume, you comprehend, you assess, and you validate, right? And if you're going to go out and gain a new skill, you consume a bunch of information, you make sure you comprehend that information, usually by practicing it somehow, right? And this is your traditional labs or just practicing at home. You then take some practice tests, or you talk to your friend, or you go to a user group, and you kind of assess your readiness on the technology, and then you go take an exam. And it's a lengthy process, right? And in the cloud world, with how frequently things change, we want to find a way to shorten that process to make it more effective, so that you only consume where you need to consume, and you assess yourself very early in the process. And so with IT Pro Challenges, you have a product where you're assessed right from the very first interaction you have. So you come into this environment that say, we'll use Azure as an example. You come into an environment that says, hey, I want you to go create a SQL server, right? A database in Azure. If you know how to create databases in Azure, you're going to be able to do that. And the system's going to let you, once you create the database, you say, hey, I've done it. You click the button, and the system goes in. It validates the database is there. It validates it was done properly, and it lets you go to the next step. If the next step was secure the database, and you don't know how to secure databases, you're not going to know what to do. When you attempt to do it, you're probably going to fail, and it's not going to let you advance past that step. It's instead going to say, hey, you failed. No big deal. Here's some guidance that's going to let you learn this topic. And once you feel you've learned it, go ahead and try again. And all this occurs within the space of, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And so maybe there's 5 or 6 steps in this process, and that comprises the challenge, right? Maybe the challenge is, can you build and secure a database?
Yep.
And there's 5 or 6 phases that will have you go through. So instead of you, attending a lecture on database configuration, attending a lecture on database security, you go right to the point. Can I do this? Can I just figure this out as I go? Do I have enough background knowledge that, maybe I know most of it, but I can figure out the last couple of bits, or am I totally stumped on this? And when you learn that fact about yourself early, you optimize the entire learning process. You're more mentally engaged. You're more likely to retain things. And at the end of the day, you've accomplished something, right? You've solved a real problem.
Yeah, no, I like the approach to it. I think it naturally goes to our human instinct. Everybody who's ever gotten some sort of package that they have to put together, your first instinct isn't to sit there and read end to end all the documents and how to do it. Yep. You might look at it real quick and go, yep, that that table is supposed to look like this, and then you get to doing it. And at some point, yeah, you might fail. The legs might be on the wrong end, and then you go back to it. So yeah, I like this approach because I think it plays to sort of our natural human instinct, especially in IT, to be like, I want to work on stuff. I don't want to I don't necessarily want to read about it. I want to get to working on it and so forth.
It's everything from IKEA I've ever bought.
Yeah, exactly.
I could do this. This looks easy.
Right, exactly.
And, an hour later, I go, ooh, I got 14 screws I shouldn't have.
Exactly. And sometimes that's okay. Now,
I bought a. I don't know if you remember the old Bowflex workout machines. I bought one of those many years ago, and looked at it and went, I put it all together, and it's got these big tension bows and rods, and it's all done. I look down and I go, I've got like 9 screws still on the floor. I was afraid to use it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you may strangle yourself if you do it the wrong way. Yeah. Now, there was as I was kind of digging into the challenges. Obviously, there's kind of a personal path that anybody can take in this, but there was an interesting case study that you'd written up from one of your kind of, I'll call them sort of like corporate side type of customers who was using them as a way of augmenting their interview and hiring process. So it wasn't just, hey, I'm going to do the typical corporate thing of like, you get an HR call, then a phone call, and then a group thing, and you're like, oh man, I don't even know if I like this company anymore. I'm worn out. Talk a little bit about what the flip side of how people are using this to, somewhat evaluate people, to challenge them if their resume is, legitimate, and just kind of the other side of it.
There's kind of 3 ways right now that folks are using these things. So there's 3 levels that we put them together. And again, this is one of the motivations for building these was also to be best of breed, to go, we've got this big, rich, elaborate platform. We can do a lot of things, but the bulk of our customers are kind of, and if you're my customer, I'm really, really sorry. They sort of lack the vision to see all that's possible. And so we built these challenges to go, look, this is how cool you can build a learning experience if you leverage all the tools that we give you. Mm-hmm. So we, that was one of the motivations for building them. We see people using them now in kind of 3 ways. So we built a guided version, an advanced version, and an expert version. The guided version, it's just, as you fail, the quality of the hints and the helps it gives you is a little different. And guided, if you fail to do something, it's very explicit. Hey, just do this. In advanced, it's more of a, well, have you looked at these couple of things because one of them might be relevant. And in expert, it just goes, you didn't get it. Oh well, go. We'll try again later. And so we're seeing those used in a couple of different ways. One of them is, training companies will bundle them with regular courses to make the courses better. But another, what I think is a really kind of cool way and cool, interesting use case is these recruiting companies, right? That want to go, hey, I need to quickly assess whether or not a person has a certain amount of skills in order to bring them into a job. And, the way I'll look at kind of internally at our own company, the way we have hired developers traditionally is, we do a series of tech screenings and then we ask them to do a project. And you're right, it's 5 or 6 interactions. It takes 5 or 6 hours, and it takes a lot of everyone's time. We've now switched the model, which is what this particular customer did, to say, okay, instead of having a lot of these tech interviews, the very first thing we do is say, here's a couple of challenges, right? They'll take you an hour, see if you can accomplish these challenges. And if they're able to accomplish those challenges, we know they've got the foundational skills that warrant moving forward in the process. And we can look at how they scored in completing those challenges to kind of rank them against each other, right? Did a particular developer breeze through it in 20 minutes? Did another particular developer take maybe 3 hours to complete the challenge, right? And that's an indicator of maybe their knowledge or the skill as it relates to the position. And so we now have, a couple of recruiting companies that are taking that approach. Instead of doing technical interviews, they open with, great, you want to come work for us? Here's the minimal bar. Here's the way you get your foot in the door. You got to complete these challenges that validate minimal skill. And if you can't, well, come back when you can.
Yeah. There's a couple of aspects to this that I really like, and it didn't necessarily dawn on me until you started talking about it. I hear from a lot of people that will go through various interview processes. And there's typically a couple of flaws, especially on the very technical ones, developer ones. There's sometimes a bias about kind of the interaction between the interviewee and the interviewer. This takes some of that bias out of what might be there, because you have to structure these things towards a lot of different types of people. You sort of take it out. It's like, hey, I just want to know if you have those skills, and it also doesn't create that thing where the interviewers are trying to do sort of the stump the chump thing, right? I mean, you're having to set certain baselines. You can, like you said, you can set it at guided or advanced or expert levels, but you're not creating unnecessary things just to sort of prove that the interviewer is smarter than the interviewee. So I like that. The other thing that I love about this, and I think as I'm digging more into it, seems sort of unique to learn on demand, is there are some companies who are kind of skew themselves towards, we're going to be the one just for new stuff. And they sort of treat things like Linux and VMs and stuff that they may perceive as, kind of old as worthless. And then you've got some that are like, we're just going to cater to the people that just want a certification, and we're going to treat new stuff as if it's some freak show. And you cover all of them and you treat them all equally. It's come in wherever you want, whether you want to be skewed more towards new or skewed more towards mainstream. And you don't give anybody that feeling that they're bad for coming in one door or the other.
No, if you look at the fabric that we operate in, and I use the term fabric a little loosely, it's kind of an internal term, but we when we build these learning experiences, they're all the same. The tool set is all the same. The methodology is all the same. The way you score, it's all the same. The fabric you choose to deploy it on, whether it's a Hyper-V virtual machine, a VMware virtual machine, whether it's Linux running in a virtual machine or running in a Docker container, whether it's native access to Azure or Amazon or Office 365, or just some random website that you happen to want to train on, right? I want to train you to search with Google. It's all the same, right? It's just a learning environment, a sandbox, whatever term you want to put on it. And then everything that surrounds it, the scoring, the way the instructions are written, the way it's provisioned, the way the reporting is all uniform and consistent. We don't care what you learn on. Why would my ego be involved in that? Why would I, punish the guys that are on VMs, just because they're old? They're not. I mean, let's be realistic here. I mean, there's still the bulk of the world infrastructure runs on VMs. And why would I look at the new guys and say, well, you're new, you're not mainstream yet? Because arguably that's where the most learning needs to happen.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. We, for folks listening, we are going to put some links in the show notes as we typically do, but we're going to put some links in there that give you free access to some of the labs environments that are going to give you some quick ways to get to these. So if you're listening and you're going, okay, I really want to go try this out, they'll be in the show notes. No need to worry about that. Talk real quick about kind of how you, because obviously the on-demand stuff is fantastic. But then, if financially these are a burden for people, just kind of talk real quickly about how you price these so that, people don't feel like there's a whole bunch of friction they can get to learning, which is ultimately the thing you're trying to do.
Yeah. So there's two elements to that. One of them is the vast majority of people don't really pay to gain access to our stuff because it's usually provided by somebody. So, for example, IT Pro Challenges in many cases are bundled with another training course you may purchase. You purchase like an Azure training package, and they may bundle challenges. Lots of companies are doing that. Mm-hmm. But we also do sell them directly. So if it's a tool that you want to personally use to just kind of get in there and play with, we do sell a monthly and a yearly subscription. There's an all access pass that gives you access to all the challenges we have, and all the new ones that we're building right now. There's I think, and we may want to put this in the notes, so we'll double check it. I'm not sure, but like 400 available challenges right now.
Oh wow!
Across Linux, Azure, Amazon, PowerShell, and then we've got a whole new series that are coming out now on AI. So Microsoft just released a series of AI containers. So we're doing a series of challenges around those because AI is a pretty hot topic right now, and there's a distinct lack of learning availability. And then we're also doing some on native Docker, which is again pretty hot, and also some on native Linux.
Very cool. Yeah, we actually just coincidentally had a show the other day with the folks from Microsoft that run things like TensorFlow and AI. So if you liked that show, there's now availability to get, or very soon availability to start playing with that stuff.
We're working on getting those built out and getting those released. And they're pretty neat because the entire thing runs on a back-end container engine, so these things spin up in a matter of seconds.
Awesome.
And then with our integrated instruction pane, we've done a lot of work to make sure that when and this is something we didn't really talk about too much, but when you get in and play with it, you'll see it. Is the instructions that every person receives when they open anything that we produce it's unique for you.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
So no two sets of instructions are ever absolutely identical, because no two environments are ever absolutely identical. Look at something that's provisioned in Azure or Amazon, for example. There are elements of it that have to be globally unique. So how do you translate that? And so, your instruction, log on to thing named 1, 2, 3, 4. Only you will ever have 1, 2, 3, 4. Someone else will have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so on.
Cool.
And all the instructions reflect that. There's no placeholder. Your server name here, that kind of stuff. We did away with all that ages ago.
Nice. Well, listen. One last question before we wrap it up. And again, thank you so much for the time today. Generally, if people come to you, they say, "Hey, I've been in the industry for a little while. Maybe I feel like I'm a little bit stagnant. In either my current job or my learning. Like, what's general advice that you give to folks? I mean, I know." We talked about being hands-on. We talked about learning to learn. But is there anything that you kind of guide people and say, hey, this is just going to help you? It's going to kind of help re-energize you and want to keep doing this stuff, because it is fun, but sometimes it is challenging.
Absolutely. So I think the issue that we have now, more so than years ago, is this notion of an IT generalist just really isn't a thing anymore. Back 20 years ago, Jesus, really that long? Wow. You could get your MCSE and be virtually guaranteed a job because everybody needed a generalist. Nowadays, with the advent of cloud, the generalist role has kind of gone away. And so what you've got to do is kind of figure out what it is you like, and then figure out a problem you want to solve, right? Maybe it's, data analysis for geography-based data. Maybe it's some element of AI. Maybe it's migrating people from, storage in their office to storage that's in the cloud. But pick a thing, pick a problem that's out there that folks are struggling with, and become an expert in solving that one problem, right? Don't worry about everything else. Don't get distracted. Pick a problem, become an absolute expert in solving that one problem, and then market yourself as an expert in solving that problem. Once you solve the problem once, now you've got evidence, now you've got proof that you can do it. You can now repeat that process. And then as you do that, you've got a skill. You've got a thing that you can go in and say, I can do this. Now you can start focusing on, well, now I can do this, and I've also added these other skills, and you slowly build out your portfolio. But many years ago, I would say, hey, go in and spend like 6 months learning all the basics. Now I say, find a problem, learn how to solve the problem, be an expert in solving that problem, then begin to branch out. But never truly lose your focus, never lose your niche.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think I agree with you. I think if you go back to even 10 years ago when we started the show, and being a generalist was useful, but so much of kind of the middle of the spectrum, is either gotten consolidated into things. It's been automated. It's part of a back end service. I think that advice of, like you said, pick one thing that you're passionate about, become really great at it, and like you said, you can then market yourself to people as, I have an expertise today, but you've also proven to them that you're capable of learning at that high level. So no, I think that's great advice. Like we mentioned, folks, we talked about a lot of things. I'm sure you're going to want to go out and play with some of the systems and engage with these. They are all in the show notes. So whether it's the IT Pro challenges or just the different lab services that Learn on Demand has, know that they'll be in the show notes. So we'll kind of avoid that. Corey, thank you so much for the time.
No problem. It was fun.
Love the passion about what you're trying to do, and love, like we said, that you guys live and breathe this stuff on the back end anyways, and so you're not asking people to do anything that you're not already an expert at. So great advice, folks. With that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank Corey and from Aaron and myself, thank you all for listening. Thanks for telling a friend, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.